Okay, friends, more. Roberto Mucaro Borrero. I'm going to invite him as a moderator. His Chief Roberto Mucaro Borrero has a distinguished and diverse background in policy and program development and human rights advocacy, including specialization of rights of indigenous people. He retains over 25 years of experience actively engaging the United Nations system in thematic areas such as sustainable development, climate change, the Information Society, and the Organization of American States, among others. He has served on the staff of the International Indian Treaty Council and the American Museum of Natural History, as well as independent contracting consultant for UNESCO, UNDP, PBS, and other notable institutions. A public writer, an accomplished artist, and a musician, Borrero is a member of the Taino tribal nation, an accomplished artist, and indigenous peoples whose traditional homelands extend through the greater Antilles to southern tip of Florida in the US. In 2012, he was traditionally sanctioned a cacique, chief of the Guayna Taino tribal community. He has education background in communications and cultural studies. In 2013, Borrero was awarded an honorary doctorate degree, Philosophy in Humanities, from Kawiwa International University, Kampala, Uganda. What a great honor to have him with us today. Please welcome him to stage.
All right, so as I think everyone has figured out, I am personally not actually Roberto Borrero, but whom we are going to hear from in a little bit. I wanted to start by just making a remark and some explanation here about what a real honor it is to feature leaders of indigenous communities on the stage and talk a little bit about that. And we've gotten this question for many years. Well, why don't you have more indigenous people on stage? Why don't you invite indigenous people to present? And that is, as what our next presenter, Troy, might talk a little bit about, somewhat of a white way of thinking. Indigenous people are not products to be, called up and flown in when it benefits people in other communities to do so. Working with indigenous communities, it takes a lot of time to develop relationships with them. And the right question to start with is how their participation in your community or your event may actually bring benefit to them. Unlike many of the people who come on the stage here, whose careers or departments or books or now businesses may benefit from their participation in these events, within indigenous communities, being asked to come to speak at a meeting of mostly non-indigenous people who have recently become interested in psychedelics, it just seems like a way to use them to extract more information and knowledge and to parade them around as a feature to be added to a conference that primarily benefits others. So I would encourage people to think about, when you're looking for the involvement of an indigenous person in your project, whether they're being approached with respect, whether you're taking the time to develop a relationship, whether it provides benefit to them, and also whether you're working with someone who can speak on behalf of their community, which can be a very, very big deal and a much slower process when working with indigenous communities than it is working with an organization or a business or another more Western leadership-oriented group. So, around the time that Mike's book came out, which is for sale in the hallway, and I do recommend everyone read, he'd probably be nice enough to sign it for you. Mike really recommended that I talk to this guy, Troy, who had been helpful in the writing of his book for reasons that you're all going to find out about in a moment. And we had exchanged some correspondence briefly. He said he had heard nice things about this Horizons thing and whoever I was, and that, we could maybe have a short phone call sometime. And, some things happened. I thought the Zoom and my other calendar, it didn't get synced to the first calendar, and I missed a Zoom phone call meeting with an indigenous community leader. and was given what I have since learned is a much deserved and common treatment, where I was issued a very stern reprimand and then given, despite my profuse apologies, a very long period of silence, to which, after a certain amount of time, a door was opened again to see if maybe I could be given another chance despite my previous failings. And I did find that by conducting myself with better honor and taking responsibility, I was allowed to build a relationship with Troy. And I've been rewarded by that, by his presence here, and he is going to explain his unique position within the Comanche Nation and the archive he operates and the work that they do, what they are hoping to see from the psychedelic community, which, believe me, is not a lot of people knocking their door, asking to learn the secrets of their healing and to partake in the medicine to which there is right now an ecological supply crisis. But I just want to reiterate to everyone here, it is an honor to have these people join us. It is a privilege as well as an honor, and that when we try to deal with Indigenous people and community, we try to do so from a place of respect and without the presumption that they are going to gain any respect in their community from going outside of their world to speak to a bunch of people whom are not within their tribe or nation to talk about the medicine. Because in the past, when they have done so, often very bad things have happened, and that they have learned over time to be very, very careful about how they engage with this topic to the outside world. So this has been my personal learning, and I wanted to share that context before we bring them on stage. Roberto Barrero, whose biography you have just heard, is going to be with us in just a moment. But to start with, it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage Troy, the last captive, whose story you're about to hear and be amazed by. Thank you, Troy. Thank you for joining us.
When I see you in you, when I see you in you, when I see you in you, when I see you in when I see you in when I see you in you. When I see you in you, 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 when I see you in when I see you in when I see you in you. When I see you in you, when I see you in you, when I see you in you, when I see you in when I see you in when I see you in you.
Moreover, Namana Nanyitsa, Queen Amakwitsoin, Akwitana. You can call me my white man's name, Troy. A long time ago, when I was a young man, I was hitchhiking in Colorado and was picked up by a person. When I got in the vehicle, I looked over at him, and what I didn't notice at first was there was a giant eagle sitting on the seat next to me. I was a little shocked. So we started talking, and he said, well, I'm on the way to an eagle's nest, and would you like to go with me? Sure. So I went with him. We went to the eagle's nest, but we could see the young eagles were already flying below us, below the cliff. So this eagle now could not be put into that nest to be released into the wild. So we left, and I went to where the eagles were housed, and I started to train this young eagle. Now, usually a golden eagle, nobody's supposed to be working with them for 10 years. I didn't know this, but I was an indigenous group, and they said, here, take this and work with this, and this is what you do. And so I did, and at the end of it, that bird went to the San Diego Zoo flight show and flew there for many years. I didn't really understand what I was getting into. This is 4 decades later, I stand here in front of you. This was a historic family from the most cultural band within the Comanches. They started taking me out and showing me the sacred places. We started collecting plants and botanicals and earthen paints for healing, for ceremony. After one of these gathering expeditions, we went from central Texas, and we work our way all the way up to about 10 miles over the Montana border. And this takes us about 6 weeks to do this. Nowadays, I seem like I have a lot of eagles at the place, so I have to split it up in usually 3 two-day periods. So at the end of this, working our way through Texas, and then Colorado, and then Wyoming, finished all the eagle work into the wild. So we were banding eagles also. So we do a parallel work. We'll do cultural work and scientific work at the same time, since we're in the same areas, plus ceremonial work to take care of the sacred places on the way. At the end, there was one more area and one more nest that we thought we'd stop at, coming out of Wyoming. Now remember, this is before cell phones or anything like that. This was in the late 70s. And we saw a huge nest on a tree that there used to be a nest, but it looked like in a different place. So we're looking through binoculars at it. It's quite a distance off. So we decided, well, this is the last one before we leave, and we're finished with what we're doing here. And so we worked our way in. Couldn't see babies, kept working our way in. Kind of looked like the nest was being used. So we got across, there's a big river in front of it, and we'd been having a lot of rains, and so the river was raging. Big tree stumps coming down it, big whirlpools going down, but I had to get across to it to check the nest. So I got across, started climbing up, got about 20, 25 feet up, and all at once, the 2 babies stuck their head up. Oh, there are babies. And they were a little too old. So I stopped and thought about going back down the tree, and immediately they see this big man coming at them. They jumped out of the nest at the same time, and they landed in the river. So at that moment, I dove out of the tree into the river, and pitch black, really cold, couldn't see anything, but I could feel them. And as I was going down the raging river, I guess, Wahatuika, my other half, who you see in that photograph with me there, holding the eagle, was running next to the river trying to figure out where I was going to come up. And all at once I felt the eagle in my hands, grabbed it by its feet, came back up, and as he said to me, all I saw was big yellow feet coming out of the water. So he grabbed it from me, I took a breath, went back under, and took off a little faster, trying to get to the next one, which I didn't know where it was. But next thing you know, again, I could feel its presence. Grabbed it, come up on the side of the bank of the river. We're all waterlogged, but the eagles were safe. So now I had to get the eagles back up into the tree, and we did that. And left really happy, couldn't call anybody because there were no cell phones, had a couple states before we got home. And so we get home, we pull up, and all at once one of the kids run out and said, Troy, you come with me. Grabbed my hand and took me with him. I didn't know what was going on. Bill didn't know what was going on. Come around the corner, and there was a fire going, and grandmother was out there. And she told me to take my shoes off, and she painted me with earthen paints. And the only time in Comanches that you get your feet painted is when you come into the tribe and when you go out of the tribe. So I was coming into the tribe at this time, so she painted my feet and sang these ancient songs. Still really wasn't sure what was going on. And at the end, she spoke to me in Comanche and talked to me about how you're now one of the people. I didn't really understand what that meant. So now I'm a captive. The only way that you can become a captive is taken in by somebody that lived as a free Comanche in the wild and had the right to do so. Grandmother lived to be 109 years old. She was the keeper of the knowledge of the teepee. Her husband, my grandfather, was the altar, the earthen altar that you saw in the photograph here just a short while ago. The altar in our band was named after him. Their oldest daughter was the keeper of the songs. She was called a song catcher. And so she could hear a song one time since she was like 5, 6 years old, and she would keep that song inside of her for the rest of her life. And actually, other tribes used to actually use her to hold their songs. So I grew up with these people. They took me to the sacred places. They taught me how to collect the botanicals, how to collect the paints, how to sing the songs, how to care for the songs. As we went on, we noticed that a lot of the elders were of an ilk that we don't really understand today. You know, they didn't have things like TV and movies and drawing all that energy out of them. They lived real close to the land. They saw everything. They heard everything. They noticed what the birds did. They noticed what the animals did. They could hear the plants. It was an amazing thing to be first person in. And so every day, all day, we would do something that was Comanche. We would go to dances. We would go to songs, healing aspects, ceremonials, wildcrafting and collecting in the wild, the songs, the stories, the history. So now we saw that now there was a splintering of our community. We were seeing that there's a lot of things in our community that alcoholism, diabetes, meth, things that were taking the parents and making them disappear and making the grandparents have to take care of the children. So we knew that this teaching wasn't getting passed on. So we decided to create SIA. SIA means feather in Comanche. Keep it simple for the people. It doesn't make any difference how much peyote we have. If in ceremony we do not have feathers, our prayers can't get to the Almighty. We pray through all the eagles of the world. So just imagine a connection to every eagle in the world in your mind right now, and the labyrinth of that creates. And as we pray over our lifetime, the capacity of that becomes stronger and stronger and impacts the whole world. We can actually feel when areas are lacking in eagles. So one of the main things that we took on was having more eagles in the world. So in the late 70s, we bred the first bald eagle through artificial insemination. That led to the government asking us, the golden eagle was extinct in the Smoky Mountains for over 100 years. Can you help us bring it back? Yeah, we can do that. So we bred 200 of them, released them in hack sites in the old nest areas in the Smoky Mountains, and now they're all back. So then they felt pretty good about it. They felt like, well, can we take on the bald eagle? I said, yeah, well, that's how you got to know us, was through breeding the first bald eagle. So we bred 200 of them and seeded them through central United States. And they started to take off as they were seeded throughout the Midwest. And so now we have more bald eagles than we ever have in the history of the world. So a little while after that, the government of Spain came to us and said, you know, we have a really rare eagle here. It's the Spanish imperial eagle. It was our national emblem. And can you help us? There's only 230 pairs left in the wild. So we said, well, we can do that, but you have to relinquish governmental control. The reason they weren't able to do it is they were always focused on papers and things that the government wanted, and they weren't focused on the bird. So we said, if you give us this and give us the power to make the decisions here, we'll take this on. And they agreed. We ended up getting a place with a friend of ours in Spain, in Oropesa, Spain, that was made for a spa, and it was a spectacular facility, but it was during the time when Spain was having problems with their government and money, and everything was going under, and so it never worked. So we got this place for about 25% of what they wanted for it. And the government decided to give us their breeding stock of their eagles. There was about 80 of them at that time, so that was about a third of the world's eagles, of the Spanish imperial eagle. So in a few years, we bred the world's first, and now we've been releasing them back into the wild. And there was another piece to that there was pesticides being used that was killing the hare, and which was taking down the eagle and the lynx. And so they created a law that banned that. And so now the eagle populations have really skyrocketed and are coming back up. So that helps their national symbol. And the reason why we did that for them is because they brought us the horse. And that's what made the Comanches the Comanches. So it was a way to be reciprocal and to give back. We'd been looking for a way for a long time, but we couldn't find it, and they offered us that opportunity. So it's been pretty spectacular to be able to do things like that. So as we pray through all the eagles in the world, that's why you're hearing from me when we're talking about psychedelics, because peyote is our sacrament, and we live our life around it, and it nurtures the root of who we are, but our prayers can't get to where they need to be without the feathers and without the eagles taking care of our earth. So right now, we're in a nice change for what's going on. We're taking on a peyote project with River Styx and Bronner's, and Comanches do everything in fours. So first we will build an altar in the middle of the mother church, which is Sia, and that will be this place where the elders and the roadmen can come and get in that place before they do the ceremonials. Then we'll build a place that has to do with a puakat living quarters and a nursery for the birthing of the peyote. Then there'll be a historic building that looks like a teepee but a lot larger, and it will be on the historic ceremonial grounds. And so it'll sit there for hardening for 5 or 6 years. And then still the laws haven't changed enough for the Texas piece yet, but hopefully by that time they will be. is that we'll be able to have land there and we'll be able to repopulate the wild there. So just my culture, the Comanches, or what they call themselves, the Numina, will have a place that's sustainable, that they can go and collect this peyote for their ceremonies. One of the things you don't really understand about Comanches, in a lot of ways, we're very private. They're very funny people, very dry, but they're also very humble in a warrior kind of way. The land where peyote grows in America is our land, Numina Sakobi, or as a lot of people would say, Comancheria. And so we have a connection to it that other tribes do not have in America. So where a lot of people go and the peyoteros pick the peyote for them and they go and collect them from the peyoteros, for us, we have songs and ceremonials before that, before the gathering, during the picking, because it's our historic land. So when you go out into the peyote fields, sometimes you can see peyote, or what we call husi. Sometimes you can't. Because for us, peyote is a sentient being and has its own consciousness and awareness and controls its surroundings. So if we can't see them, it must be that we're not in that place. So we sing these certain ceremonial songs that have those ancient tones that are embedded into them. And with that, all at once, the peyote will appear and start showing itself. It's very amazing to be part of that trust from a plant to a human, just like it is the trust from the human to the eagle. So these pieces are not really like this world that I grew up in, growing up as a white person in northern Ohio in a real industrial area where all my family ever said was, go work at the factory, you can make good money. Next thing you know, I'm living within the tribe, within the ceremonial people, and they're sharing these ancient secrets with me. After about 35 years, they called me and Wahatuika in to the ceremonial gathering. And they said, we're going to make you priests now. So this was the person that picked me up hitchhiking, and me. I had no awareness that that was something that could even happen. And at the same time, they made the place that we created, SIA, the mother church of Native American Church, or kind of like the Vatican. So we're the keepers of all the photographs, about 5,000 photographs, the material culture, any kind of documentation we find, ranch records, diaries, about 500,000 pages of that, plus the lances, the shields, the bows, everything to do with peyote, and all the songs. Surrounded by all the eagles, 140 eagles from 5 continents, about half the world's eagle species, on a sacred site. So it's very humbling to be able to be in that situation that I had no awareness of when I was young, and barely had awareness when they put me into this situation. So now it's been 5 years after that. We've noticed that there's been, say, the last presidential group, we've had problems all the time with access, not only to peyote, but to feathers. So about 45 years ago, Wahatuika, who was going to Cornell at the time, started writing the Fish and Wildlife about Native American Feather Repository. Of course, every 2 years, they'd turn it down, they'd turn it down, they'd turn it down. Well, about 12 years ago, we had a good group in, and they decided to make this a reality. So we now service all 574 tribes in the United States, usually about between 140 and 160 a year. That's not including the eagles that we release in America for them and the tribes we work in South America and Africa. And so now, instead of them starving for what they need to do their ceremonies, for a birthing ceremony, for a death ceremony, for a peyote ceremony, for layers and layers and layers of, you can imagine, 574 tribes. Now they have access to these things. And now they can, some of these tribes hadn't seen the feathers they needed in ceremonies for over 100 years. It was the United States way of being passive aggressive and trying to get them to disappear and trying to get their ceremonies to disappear. But that has changed. During the last president's time, he wanted the names and addresses of all of our practitioners. Of course, you know we can't do that. So they punished us by closing down the feather repository for about 2.5 years. So for 2.5 years, all tribes in your country weren't able to get their feathers for their ceremonies. It was unbelievably traumatizing. Not really anybody wanted to hear about it. So, as in traditional tribal people would be, they're quiet, they watch, they listen. The new president that's come in, they've decided to do something that we started pushing about 10 years ago. We have many, many, many fish and wildlife permits. They've had to make them for us, but they did not have them. So we told them, we would like you, instead of us fitting into your categories, can you make permits that fit into our categories? And so right in the middle, right now, as we're speaking, we've just got back our feather repository permit, and we can start putting the feathers back out, and they're making this new permit that has us fit into with all of this. So this psychedelic community is always looking for a way to give back. Benefit sharing doesn't really mean much to us. Honoring is usually how we go, but so I'll call it benefit honoring. So a little bit for you, a little bit for us. So what we're talking about is giving back 4% on non-Nagoya protocol plants, 8% of your company to Nagoya plants, 10 to 20% in trusts, 16 to 32% in cultural reparations, which I have a company in each one of those giving back. And the last one, who I'm in talks with one, 48% of your company to give back is called an Earth Ally. So this is the way that they can give back. Half will go to SIA and all these tribes. The other half will go to the Indigenous Medicine Conservation Fund and service all this stuff for ayahuasca, ibogaine, and psilocybin, and all the groups that River Styx and them are working with. So that's a way for you to give back. So right now I want to give you something real quick to take with you that you can use every day of your life, but let's just do it for 30 days and see how it works for you. So for the next 30 days, every time you see a bird fly past you, you just say, Nasutai. Imagine how many times that happens a day for the rest of your life. You'll internally think this, and it's an accepting the blessing from the Almighty. So it will raise you up. The last thing is, I know we've had a hard time with COVID, and I know here we've had a lot, with the World Trade Towers. It's been a hard time for people, and losing people and sadness and sorrow. And so I brought something that I'm going to share. They've asked me to pull back the curtain just a bit. And this is an eagle bone whistle. It's made from the bone of an eagle wing. This is how we call our eagles in. This is what we use in our ceremonials. So when I breathe in, you all breathe in, and you breathe in the essence of the eagle. And when I blow out, you blow out. I'm going to do it 4 times, and we're going to take care of all this sadness and all these blessings that we have for all over the planet. It's going to come from right here. Ta-da.